Hi, I'm Tim Ginter, and what a privilege to be with you tonight. And I am so grateful and thankful for not only you being here this evening and for this privilege of being a part of this, playing a small part in this gathering, but also for a pastor who's willing to speak up and speak boldly on behalf of life. Do you agree with that? Well, they asked me if I would speak specifically to the language, if I could help to break down the language, and you already have, I've noticed you already have a handout, many of you already on your seat, but I would like to dig into that a little bit deeper. First of all, it might be good if we would recognize that Ohio is one of 18 states that allows a citizen-driven ballot initiative. 32 states do not allow it at all. And that citizen-driven ballot initiative is driven by a percentage of signatures, valid signatures, that can be gathered in a certain time frame. The amount of those signatures varies from ballot initiative to ballot initiative since it is based upon an election, a presidential election prior, and the number of people that voted in the state. And so here we are in the state of Ohio. A ballot initiative, by the way, does not change the Ohio Revised Code. It actually changes the Constitution in the state of Ohio. And so what that means is this, that your representatives, your senators, the governor, the executive branch, really have no authority to go in and change it because it has become a part of the Constitution. The only way it can be changed is through an initiative process again. The last 8 initiatives in the state of Ohio have cost $50 million plus for those to be put onto the ballot. And we need to recognize that those ballot initiatives are often driven by finances from out-of-state, national, and in some cases, international funds. In the August 6th initiative, there was actually a Swiss billionaire that jumped in at the last moment to help put that over the edge. So we are involved in something that's very pivotal. We're involved in something very critical. Ohio is at the center of the target. We have been told that Planned Parenthood is spending no money anywhere else in the United States in November except in Ohio. That's what this is all about. The reason for that being that Ohio is a bellwether state. If they can win here, the other states will begin to fall like dominoes. And so there is much, much at stake. This will reverse, as you've already heard, this will reverse the law. Ever since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, it threw this back to the states, and each individual state now will determine its own laws in regards to abortion. Since that has happened, there has been frantic effort on the part of those who are pro-abortion that they are working to get initiatives like this passed in the states since it has flipped back to the states. I was privileged to be a part of the House when we voted on the heartbeat bill a few years ago. I was privileged to be able to cast my vote in favor of the heartbeat bill and to be one who was able to stand and speak on the House floor in favor of that. I was privileged to do that, but what we're facing now in a very few days is something that will not only take us back to prior to the heartbeat bill, but all the way back, as already has been explained, to full-term abortion. And so here's what we're up against. I was privileged to be invited to the governor's residence a few weeks ago with some other pastors because of his great concern over this issue. And thank God we have a governor who was willing to make a commercial for, amen. And he had his legal experts there. I am not a legal expert. I'm not an attorney. But what I will be reading to you does come from those individuals who are legal experts and who are attorneys, constitutional attorneys. And what he told us and what they said basically to us as pastors is this: the battle that we face is an uphill battle because the language, what really will be the result of the language is not really apparent in the language. And so when you make your plea, they will hold up the language and say, where does it say that in here? And so this is what we need to talk about for a few moments. And I'm going to, hopefully, this is not my opinion. This is the opinion, for example, of Megan Wold, who is a former Supreme Court clerk and former Deputy Solicitor General. This is the opinion of constitutional scholars such as Carrie Campbell Severino and Frank Scaturo. And so these are individuals that know what they're talking about. So it is a matter not only of what is said, it is a matter of what is not said. And it is put into purposely deceptive language. It has been written, in fact, our own governor looked at us and said, this is an attorney's dream, because it is very broad in its language. It's non-specific, it is purposeful, but it is non-specific on purpose. And for you and I as laymen, a good way to put it is there's gaps in this language large enough to drive a semi-truck through. And it is there on purpose. And so we need to recognize what the language is saying. So the proposed amendment is extreme. Don't let anyone tell you it isn't. You're going to hear opposite of that. You're going to begin to see even more commercials because the money's going to be pumped in to Ohio to try to put this through. And many, many individuals are voting literally out of ignorance, because they do not see, not being attorneys, not in legalese, they don't see the danger or what is really there. Special interest groups like the ACLU and Planned Parenthood have succeeded in gathering the signatures, and they have put the language, and it will come before us. So, actual text from issue 1. Every individual has a right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions, including but not limited to decisions on. Now that sounds like fairly innocuous, benign language, doesn't it? But it's very purposeful. For example, nowhere does it say woman. It says every individual, and nowhere does it say every adult. It says individual. This intentionally includes minors. An individual is a minor as well, regardless of the parent's wishes. So that word individual is there on purpose. Reproductive decisions. The reproductive decisions are this also includes, and as we will see, transgender treatments and procedures, because it does not say abortion anywhere in much of the text. It says reproductive decisions. And it says, but not limited to decisions on contraceptions, fertility treatment, continuing one's own pregnancy, miscarriage care, and abortion. And in other words, not limited to these areas. The language there sounds very specific, but what it's doing is it's telling you with those words, not limited, it's saying that what they have just listed is not all that they have in mind. All right? And that's where we could include sex change surgeries and puberty blockers and treatments. And again, remember that they've already eliminated the fact that this is for adults by merely saying individuals. So it's very purposeful language. It says that the state shall not directly or indirectly burden, penalize, prohibit, interfere with, or discriminate against either. So let's talk about what is called the Hyde Amendment for a moment. The Hyde Amendment was an amendment that eliminated taxpayers paying for abortions. But nowhere in the amendment does it explicitly say anything about taxpayer funding of abortion on demand. But it is written in a lawyerly way to ensure that courts would invalidate Ohio's version of the Hyde Amendment because the longstanding popular limit on taxpayer funding of elective abortion, listen to this, would directly or indirectly interfere with or discriminate against abortion. And so you see how they twist it, and you see how the courts will interpret that. That there'll be some very sharp attorneys that will be able to plead their case before the court. The court will look at the language, the way it is written, and they will then be able to reverse this. And frankly, it would open the door for you and I as taxpayers to pay for abortion. The text of the amendment doesn't say anything about striking down Ohio's parental consent law on abortion or creating a constitutional right for minors to get puberty blockers and sex change operations. But it would surely do all of that by declaring, as I've already said several times, that an individual, not an adult, has a sweeping constitutional right to carry out one's own reproductive decisions. That includes, but is not limited to, the text says, abortion. So my decision, if a 10-year-old child, through a process of secretive process that has taken place who knows where behind their parents' back, all of a sudden decides that they are not in the right body and that they want to change, quote unquote. By the way, you cannot change your sex, but they want to try to, in the words in the language of this generation, change their sex. This language is purposely drafted and crafted in such a way that that falls under the heading of a reproductive right and could be interpreted such by the courts. It says then, the last point I would like before I move on and turn this over to our next speaker. The average individual, the average Ohioan will get the wrong impression by reading the text of the ballot that the amendment would allow meaningful limits on late-term abortions. And where they will read that is in where it says, however, abortion may be. Notice it does not say shall be. If it was definitive, it would say shall. That word may is there on purpose. It says may be prohibited after fetal viability. Abortion may be prohibited after fetal viability, the age of viability, but in no case may such an abortion be prohibited if, in the professional judgment of the pregnant patient's treating physician, by the way, which could be an abortion provider, that could be the treating physician, finds it is necessary to protect the pregnant patient's life or health. Our first speaker already touched on the fact that health is a very broad term. By legal precedent, health includes not only physical health, we're not talking about just endangering the life of the mother, but it includes physical health. Precedent meaning, of course, let me back up, that courts have there's already precedent where courts have ruled in such a manner as I'm about to describe to you. Health also includes emotional, mental, and even financial health. So, in reality, a woman could go right up to full term and tell her doctor that this baby is going to provide an extreme financial strain on her and on her family, and that would allow that doctor to make an exclusion and perform an abortion on a baby right up to the point of birth, full term. Now, what you're going to hear, and I want to emphasize this again, you're going to see some slick commercials. I'm sorry for speaking so bluntly, but you're going to see some slick commercials. You're going to even see a pastor who's sitting in a sanctuary talking about counseling individuals in regards to abortion, and then he will very passionately say and compassionately say, this is no place for the government needs to stay out of this. Many people will be swayed by this. They'll be swayed by the language because of the vagueness of the language, purposely crafted to be deceptive, but they will also be swayed by this argument that the government has no right to be in, quote unquote, the bedroom or the personal decisions like this. If I may, before I close, let me talk about that for a moment, because that is absolutely false. God raised up and ordained government for the betterment and the protection of humanity. And so should government be involved in personal lifestyle choices? Well, I would tell you there are thousands of laws right now already on the books that determine and that declare what an individual can and cannot do. For example, there are laws regarding age restrictions and laws regarding the limitation of sexual relationship between an adult and a minor in a bedroom. That is a law restricting behavior, and yet is a law that very much should be in place. There are laws on minors using tobacco, laws against minors using alcohol, laws against minors driving a car, thank goodness. So there are many, many laws. Like we could stay here all night talking about the motivation of government to protect citizenry. And what we're talking about here is the protection of life of the weakest, most vulnerable human beings on earth. They literally have no voice. And we should have laws in place to protect them. Well, so ultimately, you're going to have to decide who is right. Because someone is not telling the truth, right? And you're going to have to decide who is. We live in a day of postmodern relativism, where absolute truth is totally rejected. And so there will be those who will unashamedly, unabashedly make commercials telling us the opposite. And again, this wasn't my opinion. This was the opinion of those that I haven't even mentioned, other legal experts that have analyzed the language and have come to the very same conclusion. Well, what should we do? First of all, I am so grateful again for a church that is willing to host this and step into this arena. And I'm so thankful for this couple down here who's willing to take this on. This is what we need. It's time for the church to arise. It's time for us to find our voice. Part of the responsibility of the church is to expose evil. And I don't know of anything more evil than this. If we don't find our voice on this, we'll never find our voice. And so Charles Finney was a prominent evangelist in what historians have called the Second Great Awakening. In 1835, Charles Finney wrote this: "The church must take right ground in regard to politics. God cannot sustain this free and blessed country which we love and pray for unless the church will take right ground. Politics are a part of religion in such a country as this, and Christians must do their duty to the country as part of their duty to God. He, God, will bless or curse this nation according to the course Christians take in politics." I couldn't have said it any better. Well, I've gone over my time, but I would say this to you. John Hancock, who signed his name, beautiful signature in the middle of the Declaration of Independence, when speaking to Christians back in our battle for independence, and you can look this up, I'm not making this up. John Hancock said to the Christians, he said, "I would that you would not only pray, but that you would act." It's time for us to act. God bless you.